please don't be shy. Please say hello. Maybe tell us where you are, what you're excited to hear about today or to talk about today. But I also need to point out just below, two spaces below the chat tab, you'll see a question mark, and that's where we want your questions. Today, we're going to have lots of time for questions, maybe half the session dedicated to your questions. So please use that tab rather than the chat tab. I hope that's clear, just because it's easier for us to keep track of them there. One more thing, we're going to run a poll, which my colleagues are going to share in just a moment. We really would like to know what your challenges are, and really the kinds of tools that might be helpful to you. And that is a different tab, although you can see it also in the chat tab right now. So please vote now on our poll so that we know who we're talking to and what your big challenges are. The final thing, this session is being recorded. Someone asks every time. Yes, it's being recorded. The whole summit is being recorded, and we're going to send all of the sessions to you pretty much as soon as the summit finishes. So no need to take notes. You'll have it all. With that, I think that's pretty much all you need from me. I'm going to introduce, first of all, Jorge, and then we'll hear from Julien.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And I'm really happy to be here. Thank you very much, CFO Connect, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to participate with you, with Julien. And thanks again. I'm, husband and 3 times father. Before launching Abacum, I worked as CFO and COO in really fast-growing companies. And I experienced the frustration of manually doing all financial planning with no proper tool, right? I'm co-building Abacum to help companies with better reporting, forecasting, and budgeting. And we have customers, all over the world, and backed by investors like Atomico, Creandum, and YC, among others. And thanks again.
Wrong button. Hi all. Really happy to be here as well. I'm Julien, CFO of Spendesk. I've been CFO of several scale-ups in the last actually 7 years. BlaBlaCar, for those who know it. In Europe, many people know it. And now very happy at Spendesk with a great team, happy user of Spendesk and many other tools actually. And I'll be very happy to, discuss what you go through regarding tools in, when you do acquisitions, when you have to integrate companies, and just when you take your new function, etc. That's it.
Wonderful, thank you both. All right, let's get right into it. The first question I have is maybe a slight curveball, or maybe I'd like to approach this not just by listing a bunch of tools, but actually to get more at the heart of the challenges that finance leaders have. And so the first question I have, maybe for you, Jorge, suppose you're a finance leader, or in your case, a COO coming into a new business, a new company, a new role. Is the tool stack the first thing you're looking at?
Well, I do have been a CFO for quite some time in my career, and I have faced that challenge. I think, and it's not the right answer yet. Let me expand on that. Is I will look at everything, right? Because at the end, what happened in the past, right? I needed to understand current processes. I needed to understand the expectations from the finance function. As you get to talk with the management team, founders, right? Understand exactly what are their challenges and what do you expect from you, right? And that's really important. Then you need to assess the people on your team, and then the systems and tools that you have to reach your goals. And then yes, of course, choosing the right tools it's key, because you need to set yourself to meet those expectations that I was mentioning earlier, right? And to be able to reach your goals, and not only the short-term goals, but also you need to look ahead, okay? And then you do need the right people in place. That's also something that I didn't want to disregard. But also you need to make sure that all your team is set up for great things and to bring value to the company, which is what I think finance leaders we should aim for, right? And so, and in order to do that, clearly the tools that you're gonna work are gonna clearly mark the type of service, support, and insights that you're gonna be able to deliver to your company, and so that's more or less when you were. It's a really difficult question. I know today's topic is about tools, and we'll discuss about that, but also highlighting that you need to understand the whole spectrum of stakeholders, expectations, and your team in place.
Julien, do you see it the same way?
So my answer would be, the short answer would be no, tools are not the first thing I look at. I would definitely start with people, then with processes, and then with tools. And that's quite important to me, because tools, fundamentally, they're easy to change. People will tell you, oh, it's very difficult, it's painful. Maybe, sometimes you love a tool, but the truth is you can change tools, more easily than other things. So I usually go into, okay, people and the process. I would say once you have a process, sometimes you inherit tools and, you'll work with them. So obviously you look at them, right? I agree with Jorge in that point, for sure. The thing is, I would look at the process, define my process, then look for a tool, and as close to my process as possible, right? Because I don't want to overhaul everything. But what I did in the past was, okay, I found a tool which is as close as it could, to what I want. And then I will adapt my process, but I will not customize the tool, and embark on a 3, 6, sometimes, companies spend a year or two customizing and spending a lot on consultants, and not, it's defocusing the whole finance function or company. So I would okay, I choose the tool and then I adapt the process. And then, as a matter of fact, once I chose, I don't want to change, every now and then.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting. Now, having said everything you just said, are there any operational must-haves, any things that just you can't avoid it, you're going to need some sort of tool, or certainly a process, but some sort of tool to handle this process, and you know it right away? Maybe Jorge.
I think, and I cannot keep on thinking on what all of us have experienced in the last year and a half, probably, since everything changed, dramatically in the market. I would speaking for tech startups or tech companies or scale ups, but probably it also affected more traditional businesses. And I would say that what we have seen, right, is the need for companies to make sure they have a good control over their operational and financial metrics, understanding of their business, so you can make decisions as fast as possible, right? So having everything under control, having all your stakeholders, budget owners on the same page on regards on where the business is, right? Because at the end, sometimes I think us as finance leaders, we need to understand and we need to thrive to speak farther beyond the finance, right? It's about the business health, and we need to look into a different set of metrics, not only financial KPIs. And I think that's been clearly displayed on the last year and a half, and even if you think about COVID, how fast we had to react. But current market conditions where they clearly, we must make sure that there are no surprises, right? So for me, that became an operational must-have. Make sure that you are able to provide that valuable information and insights to the company, so you made the right business decisions.
Just to drill in on that, sorry to interrupt you, Julien. Practically speaking, does that mean really great bookkeeping tools that make sure that the numbers are where you need them when you need them? Is it more business intelligence and reporting so that you can share those numbers easily? What specifically are we talking about there?
No, of course. I think on the tool side, and I don't want to mention mine, but I'll mention the sector. But of course, you need to make sure that you're able to bring all that data together, easy and fast, able to understand it, share it, collaborate with the different stakeholders that are going to provide you valuable information and insights to understand your business, right? I think that for us, it's key, and that's one of the things that I had in mind when I was talking about those expectations from the finance team and making sure that you are set for success. In our space, right? There is a need to make sure that data is correct and accurate, and there's a big pressure on having that in place, right? And so by adding tools that help you be much more insightful to your colleagues, to your partners, it's adding a lot of business, a lot of value to the business, right? And yes, Patrick, I agree. You need to have the right ERP and accounting software to have data correct, and then be able to have the system in place that is allowing you to gather that information beyond finance, to include those operational KPIs and metrics, so you speak the business language.
Julien, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No. That's very interesting. On my side, I would split between what's, let's say, mandatory from tax and compliance point of view, and maybe the rest, okay? Which once again, depending on the maturity of the company, its size, and so on, some will tell you, I have no tools, I outsource everything and I'm fine. Even accounting, I don't even have an accounting tool. And some will tell you, I could not live without my treasury management system or my sophisticated, financial planning tool, and so on. Whereas, maybe 2 years before they were doing everything on Excel, but you get accustomed, and you get, as Jorge said, a lot of productivity gains and a lot of value added to the business, right? As you mature. But I think I always would put first things first, which is basically accounting and doing your tax properly and so on, because this, it's not negotiable. Having said that, I have a funny story. So I'm not that young, and exactly 20 years ago, I landed in Angola as a CFO of a subsidiary of a big group. It was like a startup within a big old group, and the group was telling me, we'll have this fantastic ERP and so on, but we're working on it. All these consultants, it will be ready in 6 months, and then you have the tax authorities, and you're like, no, I have to provide something. So, I first went to, looked at some off-the-shelf software, and I'm like, okay, let's do it in Excel. It's not that complicated. It's a good kind of training, and, you learn a lot by doing that, and so even accounting, in fact, you can do it in Excel. Is it optimal or good or enjoyable in the mid-long term? Certainly not. You need a tool, but that's how I really improved in accounting. And then I guess as you mature, and I think we can talk about it in other questions or whatever, but yeah, you need a good FP&A tool. You need maybe cash forecasting and others.
Julien, just to touch back, you've mentioned consultants a couple of times here, and we've discussed before, you have this notion of the true cost of a piece of software. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about how you evaluate not just the price tag, but what the true cost of a finance tool is.
Right. So disclaimer, I was a consultant before. I love consultants. So yeah, total cost of ownership is actually, I saw there was one of the categories which was in the poll, which was company communication and education. We always try in the finance function to kind of let's say educate the organization about finance concepts and so on, and total cost of ownership is dear to me. And you can take the car as a classic example. we usually compute the cost of a trip as gasoline and toll. When you think total cost of ownership, you're like, okay, but how many kilometers do I do in a year? And then, oh, insurance cost, if it's 1,000 euros and I run 10,000 kilometers, in fact, it's 10 cents per kilometer. And then you have maintenance, you have financing, you may have cost of opportunity. And so you look at all this and you realize that the cost of just, driving your car is probably double or triple just the gas and toll, right? Same thing for software. You will think at first, oh, it's the license price and that's the cash out. But in my past, so not in my current job, but I had a really good tool actually, an ERP called Workday. I think everybody has heard of it. But I had one FTE just taking care of Workday. So in fact, in terms of total cost of ownership, I had the license plus one FTE plus some side costs. And that's really important. You can even, I think these days, integrations with other pieces of software are really important. So you can even compute, potential loss or gain of productivity depending on what integrations are available, risk of error, of manual activities that your team has to do on the sides. It's not easy to model. I think you don't want to get it 100% accurate, but 80-90% you should not fool yourself into thinking that the cost of the tool is really the price you pay to the supplier.
Jorge, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
It was a great answer. Clearly, you need to make sure that you account for all that when choosing and when using a tool and when assessing if it's returning the right ROI to the business, which is what all of us are now obsessed with, right? And efficient growth.
Absolutely. And I think actually we can pivot here into one of the questions from the audience, because I think it's pretty appropriate. It's from Fleur. And the question is, at which stage, and I bring this up because you mentioned integrations and the way that tools work together. At which stage of the company's development do you switch from a mix of tools that each solve one unique problem to a more comprehensive ERP, for example, that provides a one-stop shop? How do you know that you're ready for that change? Are there any telltale signs?
It's a multi-million-dollar question. Let's start.
Well, that's extremely difficult, and again, I think Julien said something at the beginning, right? Of when you are at a company, understanding the people, the processes, and clearly have a clear expectations for what the tool is going to do at each step, and so there is that for me, I think it's a key, have a clear expectation of what the tool is going to provide. And then yes, a one-stop shop for a lot of things, it sounds really cool, but it might be really hard that it meets the different expectations. Then if you grow a lot, then you might see a benefit, but I don't have an easy answer. And Julien, I'm gonna have to bring you back to the spot. I know.
Yeah. No, so rather than so I won't give a magic answer, but I can tell a few stories. When we chose to actually take Workday at BlaBlaCar, so which is very comprehensive, we had a myriad of tools, right? For accounting, for expense reports, we had, I think, Expensify at the time, and it was kind of, we had the best of breed, right? And happy about that. And then you look at, you kind of, it's not even that you necessarily outgrow your tools. Sometimes it's the case, but in our case, we could survive. But we looked at the sum of the costs and we were like, sounds, quite expensive. And then we did a request for proposals to several more kind of integrated tool, like one in all in one, and yeah, it was cheaper. And it was cheaper, not, as we said, you know, not just in the from the license price point of view, but also from your productivity and total cost of ownership, etc. And in fact, as the finance function, you know, maybe I put a bit too much pressure on myself and the team, but I'm convinced that you have to show the example on costs and efficiency, because you usually go around and tell everybody in the company, oh, you know, it's important to be efficient and so on. So if you don't show the example, you know, your whole your whole discourse, or you know, your whole speech just falls apart. And so that's how we did it in the case of BlaBlaCar. Now, on the other hand, in my so between BlaBlaCar and Spendesk, I was with a company that had tools by region and so on, and it was too early to have one integrated tool. So we accepted to have different tools, like, you know, NetSuite for one region and Sage for another one, and so on. Was it optimal? You know, could we have done cheaper and so on? Yes, but it was not ready, especially in terms of people and processes. So, you know, in theory, it was the right moment. I could feel it, but then you look objectively and like, okay, let's not embark on that right now. Let's give ourselves 2 more years.
Just to go a little deeper on that, not ready in terms of people and processes. What do you mean by that?
So it's funny. It's very interesting, but some companies are very modern and have all the tools and use them well. Some are very manual and kind of backwards and basically answer any question or issue with more resources in terms of people, right? And not, you know, through processes and tools. And so, yeah, we were not ready because we had to fix our processes. So it comes back to my first point at the beginning. If we didn't fix our processes first, if we didn't fix our, you know, data flows, etc., we would have had garbage in, garbage out, and been unable to use the tools. So yeah, I wanted to do that first and not kind of put the I don't know in English, the ox in front of the cart, so to say, you know.
Yep, horse in front of the cart, exactly. Everyone will live, ox is fine too. Okay, I want to change topic almost completely, because from our poll, the relatively clear winner, obviously there's a lot of challenges and we had a bit of a mix, but FP&A is the big one that people want to talk about. And we have a question from Jamil, and I think we have the right person to get the conversation started in, Jorge. So the question from Jamil is, what are you looking for in an FP&A tool as a CFO?
Patrick, I will not say that I'm not happy to see the results of the poll. And I 100% agree with that. So the right tool, and I think Julien was bringing, and I mentioned that it's extremely difficult now when providing these answers, which is the state of the company, the level, early stage, later stage, multinational, right? And so I don't want to repeat myself, but clearly understanding where you are, and I think understanding your system, your process, what data you have, what are your objectives, and you need to have all that in mind, right? To choose the right tool. You need to assess, have a clear scorecard at the end. If you were going to hire someone, of what do you need from that tool? What do you expect? Different levels of flexibility, complexity management, how they model the. So I see, and let me briefly finish. So when I look at an FP&A tool, we could talk about 4 concepts. You could talk about data and ETL transformations, how you bring all that data. You will talk about planning, modeling, forecasting. You will talk about corporate performance reporting, and then there's a 4th bucket which applies to all of the 3 previous, which is the collaboration part. Okay, So you need to understand from your business perspective, what do you need at each different stage. I have a lot of Excels and Google Sheets. Therefore, I do not have that much data integration needs or the different set. In terms of modeling, what are the complexity of my modeling, the dimensions and the stuff like that, and on the reporting side, what type of reports do I want to build, right? That's what I look, and the collaboration piece, sorry, and how many people I'm going to be collaborating with. And so those are the components that you need to assess internally to choose the right tool for you at the different stages. Hope I answered the question, Patrick.
I think so. Julien, anything to add as someone who's built FP&A teams and integrated tools?
Yes, sure. So I've had the situation where we didn't have a tool, we were doing it in Excel, and if many people don't use even 10% of the functionalities of Excel, but FP&A tools, FP&A teams usually use it well. And when they tell you, it's not enough, not solid, not sometimes you have kind of access management topics and especially when you do modeling. I think Excel is really not possible anymore. So that's where we adopted the tools. Sometimes we didn't choose it happened to me, we didn't choose the right tool. Then you have to be able to actually go out of it and change, and it can happen. But as Jorge said at the beginning, the value it can add, and it's not always very, at least precisely quantifiable, but is just enormous. So usually get a very good ROI, which is nice when you're in finance. You tend to look at that, right? So that's what I can say. But I would say, after the accounting and everything around regulatory topics, I guess that's the first one that I look at, because it's just adding so much value. Cash forecasting, we can debate it if you want after, but it's a whole different topic.
Okay, wonderful. And I think you've pretty much answered this question. Certainly you mentioned modeling, but we have a question around Excel and how do you know you've outgrown Excel, essentially? Are there other specific challenges or areas that, at some point Excel is just not going to get it done?
So Excel can do a lot, actually. So I won't answer your question directly, but it's an interesting story it's funny in hindsight. When you're in it, it's not that funny, but back in 2020, COVID, transportation business, everything stopped, forbidden to travel, your revenues go to zero. And we had to, just review our planning, okay? And we had all these sophisticated models with a beautiful tool and so on and so forth. And at first I asked, the analyst, okay, let's plan that, make scenarios about what can happen through this COVID period. And it was March 2020, nobody knew. We just knew we would be locked in, and that was it, no end in sight or whatever. And in fact, at some point I realized that he was incapable of making it simple enough and in fact directionally right and not precisely wrong, right? Especially when you do scenarios about the future. Yogi Berra is like, his quote is, it's tough to make predictions, especially about the future, right? So basically you're with a beautiful tool, a lot of data, and in fact, you're stuck because you need something simple that the CFO and the CEO, who have limited brains, can understand easily. And it's about the orders of magnitude. So at this point, we kind of went out of our tools, went back to Excel, and I spent a night, I remember, doing something very simple, that we could play with not 120 variables that we had in the model, but like 10, because there was an urgent situation and we couldn't play with 120 variables. Having said that, and coming back to your question, when you have 120 variables, don't use Excel. So that's why I gave this example. We had to come back to Excel because we needed something very simple. But the truth is, after you reach a certain size and complexity of the business, you have to face complexity, and Excel will be of no use when you reach that.
If I may, Patrick, and I love Julien's example, what we've seen, right, and one of the things that we say, so we don't actually replace Excel, right, because I think what Julien just described is a good example. At some point, Excel has its use, but it needs to be properly used. What we see is that companies today, the amount of data that they want to use, that they need to use, clearly is putting Excel in a lot of pressure in order to be used properly, fast, not breaking, right? Julien said, no, 20 years ago, I'm also not I'm not 20 years old, so I still remember when Excel had a limit of 65,000 rows, right? I loved it when it increased, but at the same time, it put a lot of pressure on the amount of data that Excel had to move, and that kept on growing. And so today, Excels are extremely a big pain. So data, all the amount of data that we are generating in today's businesses, that puts a lot of pressure. Plus the complexity in which you want to see your business, as Julien was saying, and the collaboration piece, right? Excel is not a good collaborative tool. And you might think on Google Sheets, but then Google Sheets lacks a lot of power, which Excel has, right? So that's what we see when companies, truly look into a financial planning solution, is when they have these three buckets of problems, of urgency, or they want to upscale their function.
Thank you. Okay, to change topic again, this time more on accounting. I think I know that you won't name a specific. We've asked what is your favorite accounting tool. I think I know that you're not going to answer the question, but the question is really around managing subsidiaries in different countries and consolidating those. If you have a favorite tool that you love that helps you do that, that's great. But otherwise, how would you approach finding the right tool to do that? What are the questions you need to ask, or what are you looking for? Julien, please.
I think not all tools are good at that. So without mentioning tools, I mentioned, I used Workday and it worked for us in the past, and NetSuite works. We all know it, and so on. But it's obviously you have to ask the right questions and be able to do a proper request for proposals and really assess it practically. Some vendors tell you, they are completely international ready and so on. Not always true. Most of the time you need a kind of a local accounting firm, and then you have to see how it will enter your tool, right? And what's the process for that. So we clearly split that in the past and made sure that we had the proper accounting for local tax authorities, etc. But we dealt with the foreign subsidiaries in our tool. Okay. Once again, it's people, process, and the tool. What I can say as well is we made international acquisitions in the past, and then you have to integrate. So it's very rare that the two companies use the same tools, accounting tools. I'm sticking with accounting, and so usually the buyer imposes its tools, right? And then you have the migration question, and will it be okay for this country, and so on. So you don't know who you're going to acquire and where, so you'd better make sure that it's not the country specificities are not an issue in any case. And in fact, what we liked about Workday was that it was not about, the local accounting codes and so on. It was about, how you classify, expenses and so on, but from a more generic way. The issue we had, on the other hand, was if you have pure accountants who are, very who like the accounting codes and so on, they're very disturbed. So the issue we had was more like, okay, we had something that could go international. We could do everything we wanted, and we had the right processes. But from a people point of view, you're doomed to lose people, because some people don't adapt, and they're kind of enamored with their tool, and when you change it, they're just like, I go, so they leave. And some others are maybe skeptical at the beginning, but then they enter into it, understand the logic, which is not their old logic, but love it and embrace the whole thing and stay. But we had a lot of collateral damage of people, accountants telling us, I'm leaving. I don't want to use this tool.
Brilliant, thank you. We actually just got a really interesting question that will lead us into the next session. So I'm keen to get your point of view, although please bear in mind, the question is about AI, and I think it's the next session straight after this is also about AI. So please stick around for that. Anonymous, they didn't leave their name. Are you using any tools that use AI in an interesting or a smart way today? Or aware of any that you're excited to use?
That's a really good question. There's a lot of hype on AI. From our side, how we're using it internally, yes, it's clearly shown a productive impact for developers. Our engineering team, they've benefit on the Copilot and usage of AI technologies. Content creators, different. On finance side, because I probably it's more related to us at these days. I haven't yet found a solution that we're using with a lot of confidence. At the end, one of the things that some AI tools have shown is that they can come up with stuff, right? You will ask them a question and they will come up with an answer, which that's really annoying for a finance professional, right? I don't want to find myself that I was lied by the tool in a sense, right? And so financially speaking, we haven't embraced it as a tool. We do use it, cash classification, and there is some relevant AI machine learning algorithms that you can use. But on the OpenAI, on the generative AI type of thing, it's still not yet on the finance. On other teams, yes, we are extensively using it to improve productivity and support.
Yeah, short answer is no, but we're working on it and we're not close to it. It's barely 1 year old, and so answer is not yet.
Yeah, the finance people I've spoken to about it, who are using it, are using it in sort of the way that you explained, Jorge, where it's more the tasks that are not strictly finance related. The writing emails, the Slack messages, the drafting slides for reporting, those kinds of things. It's really not too much different from writing anything. But exactly as you said, you have to be pretty careful about what it makes up and how it phrases things, because it can be very creative to its credit and detriment. We have a question here. Again, it's tool recommendations. So you'll interpret that however you want, but specifically for startups. And this probably takes us back a little bit to the operational must-haves versus the strategic nice-to-haves or the add-ons. If you're a startup that needs to have accounting, payroll and expenses, budgeting, inventory planning, CRM, do you have any recommendations there, or is it really a case-by-case basis?
Maybe I can start, but it depends on the size, If we're talking about a startup that's not really big, I would start by outsourcing payroll for sure. Probably outsourcing a large part of accounting, and then only invest or focus on what's core, so CRM, because you mentioned CRM, then okay, it's your customers, but I would first put customers, the business, what enables me to sell or do R&D, develop my product, enhance my product, and then all the rest I would outsource. So yeah, the answer is no tool at the beginning, maybe even no team or on support functions.
And then leading on from that, are there telltale signs, are there clear signs when you've outgrown outsourcing, when you need to bring these things in-house?
Yes, for sure. I mean, and here I think there's no magic recipe, as we were saying before, but you can feel it. There's a question of critical size, where you start hiring someone to coordinate your subcontractors for payroll and accounting. At some point, it explodes, and like, okay, we need 2 people, 1 for each, and like, okay, so in fact, you start, insourcing or, taking on some activities internally, and you reduce. And I think it's a process, we're not a small company, but we still outsource some parts. But progressively, we gain critical mass. I think it's critical mass, FTEs, specialized FTEs, basically persons. You cannot slice them, right? So I guess you have the trigger is you reach the size where you can employ a person full-time, right? And then it's 2, and then 3, and etc. Obviously, when you have 100 people, it's much easier because it's 1% by 1%. But at the beginning, going from 1 to 2 is to double. So you still outsource a bit, and there you go.
I would add another dimension that I like to look, which is when you need more control or speed at sometimes. Like for instance, on our side, right, accounting was outsourced, but at some point I needed to have better classification of the accounting elements. I wanted to have the closing earlier so I could have information slightly more complex, right? So that was difficult to manage with the outsourced provider, and therefore we decided to hire someone internally to fully control that process, to be faster and to be to be able to provide more value to the business. So having that visibility on that aspect, I think the value, because Julien mentioned the concept of value and ROI, and it highly resonated. And I think for me, at some point, when you're looking to this outsourced providers, in a sense, you are outsourcing what is not core. Suddenly some process, it becomes core for you, and you bring it internally.
Wonderful. I think this will be our last question. Thank you all very much for submitting them. And I've made Matthew wait for almost the entire webinar to ask his questions, so I'm very keen to get to it. Matthew is an advisor in a bookkeeping firm working with small businesses, and is interested in, if you put yourself in his shoes, so you're advising small businesses, are there any metrics or tactics that you look for specifically if you came into a business? Things that you can help. He's really talking about growing businesses. So if you want to help those businesses grow, what can you look for when you consult, when you come into that role?
For the finance function.
Bookkeeping. It's a bookkeeping firm, so yes, I imagine it's the finance function first. Yeah.
Yeah. So on my side, at some point, as I had a big team in the past, we had classic metrics, accounts payable, how many invoices can you process, and etc. So you have the basic productivity metrics. The interesting thing is that companies like to measure many things, and as I said, finance should show the example. But it was kind of a revolution when I said, we should apply that to us, and yeah, just look at our productivity. I was like, okay, but that's strange. No, that's not strange, in fact. So and in that regard, I think the beauty of it is that tools can really, really improve productivity. It's not a forum to advertise anything, but I can tell you that the productivity of the finance team or accounting bookkeeping, between my former firm and Spendesk is vastly different, and I have an idea about why.
Go ahead, Jorge, if you have anything to add.
No, I was actually trying to think, but on the bookkeeping side, so I think if I look at the question, he also mentions QuickBooks Online. One of the things that we see among our customers is that the smaller business that might start with QuickBooks or Xero, they are using other tools to support on those systems that might lack some of the complexity of other ERP or other accounting, like NetSuite or Microsoft or these guys. So I think there are ways in which you can improve some of those systems with more complex items without having to upgrade. And going back to what Julien was saying, trying to be more productive and increase productivity from that angle.
Wonderful, thank you. I think that's going to be it for our session. It was really wonderful to see you and to have you share your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience, Jorge and Julien. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you to the audience, everybody out there, for your wonderful questions and for participating in the chat. This is only day 2 of Summit. We have another session starting in 10 minutes, and as I promised, it's on AI and automation. So I know a lot of people will stick around for that. Also networking straight after that. So please get involved there, get to know each other, the other Summit attendees. Tomorrow we have more great sessions. So we hope to see you at them. And otherwise, just thank you very much, everyone, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Thank you very much, everyone.